And Christy and her family come from Hong Kong. The language of the home is Cantonese and English in the States. And their son, Vincent, grew up speaking Cantonese and English. When Vincent was a little boy, mom and dad were working really hard. Christy was a new professor, Silicon Valley doing tech stuff. So they occasionally had to hire a babysitter. The babysitter, who was Chinese but not Cantonese speaker, would come over, turn on the television to Mandarin cartoons. Now, you guys know this, but Donald Trump doesn't know this, I'm sure. Mandarin and Cantonese are not the same language. They're related, but they're not the same. If you speak Cantonese, it doesn't mean you understand Mandarin. There's shared vocabulary. It's kind of like, you know, Arabic, Amharic, Ethiopian, and Hebrew, all Semitic languages. It gives you somewhat of a head start. My case, for example, I speak two Semitic languages, Amharic and Hebrew, and I've been to Arabic-speaking countries. I understand about 5–10%, especially when it's technical stuff and it's real talk on linguistics. But that doesn't give me command of the language. It gives me a little bit of a head start. So he had this head start and could understand a little bit. The babysitter helped out, and cartoons. You ever watch children's cartoons? They're wonderful. I even watch them when my grandchildren aren't around. I watch them on airplanes. SpongeBob, oh my, SpongeBob is so interesting.
It is more than amazing.
It's amazing. I'm a little worried about SpongeBob, though. You have to make some changes. Now, SpongeBob works in a restaurant that makes crab sandwiches, right? Who's the owner of the restaurant? Mr. Crab. There's something really sick about that. They've got to look into that. Anyway, but otherwise, I find SpongeBob to be a wonderful, wonderful character. So he started watching these cartoons. The visuals help. He watched the same ones. They were compelling again and again. Gradually started to acquire Mandarin from television. When he was in elementary school, he was watching Mandarin children's shows. In high school, when Dad came home every weekend, he brought 2 movies in Mandarin. His grandparents lived with them for quite a while. And in the evening, they'd all watch the news in Mandarin. Today, Vincent, who's now a college student, Vincent speaks Mandarin. He has never lived in a Mandarin-speaking country unless short visits, and he's never studied it, but he's absolutely fine. Christy Lau, his mom, tells me when company comes over and they're Mandarin speakers, he does absolutely fine. When they go to Beijing or Taipei, he does absolutely well. Here's the interesting point, and I find this remarkable. Vincent was never motivated to learn or acquire Mandarin. He doesn't care. Now, the Chinese government, the Beijing government, is pushing everyone to learn to speak Mandarin. It's our common language and all that. He doesn't care about all that propaganda. He acquired Mandarin not because he wanted to, but because he was interested in SpongeBob. He liked the cartoons. Now, you know, you've been through this. You teach, say, junior high school English to 12-year-old kids or 11-year-old kids, and they're not particularly motivated. So you probably tried what a lot of people do. You say, you know, you better pay attention in English class because it's a very important language, and you'll be very happy that you took English seriously. That doesn't work. You know that. They're not thinking about class. They want to go on their skateboards, you know, and all that. But tell them a good story in English, and they will acquire whether they want to or not. So motivation, the way we traditionally define it, doesn't count. It's a good story, a compelling story that counts, in my opinion. Another big point. Language acquisition is gradual. It doesn't happen all at once. Each time you see a word in a comprehensible context, you get a little piece of it, not all of it. Over time, you get the whole thing. So you see a word in a story, you hear a word, get maybe 5–10%. You hear it again and again without really realizing it. You gradually acquire the whole meaning. So language acquisition is gradual. You get it from context, you get it from people helping you. I want to make some comments about application. And I'm basically going to introduce you to the work of my colleague, Beniko Mason. BenikoMason.net. You can find all her stuff for free. Good influence. And I think she's really got it right. The core of her method, stories. That's it, folks. Stories are our best friend. I'm beginning to think stories are the way we learn anything. Let me tell you about first language. The research on first language acquisition, children love stories. The more stories children hear, the more they know, the better their vocabulary, the more they want to read on their own, the better they do on all tests in school. 95% of children like to hear mommy and daddy tell them stories. The ones who don't like it are when mommy and daddy don't like telling stories. It's universal. It's the foundation of everything. You get grammar, you get everything, you get vocabulary. All this comes from stories. Oh, I had an easy time when I was growing up. I grew up in a middle-class family with lots of books all the time. My mother, that was a reader. They both were interested in stories. My sister, who's 4 years older than I am, she's like 83. She still thinks she's my assistant mother. She's still taking care of me, which is very nice. She's still worried about me. She read me stories. And when I was 9 years old, she took me to the local library and got me a library card. Isn't that awesome? What a family. So of course I couldn't miss. Middle class kids just can't miss because there's so much literacy. In second language, the interesting methods are based on stories. Beniko's is a very good one called Story Listening. Check out Story Listening. You can go to the website, storiesfirst.org. The teacher tells a story that is mostly comprehensible, but little parts may not be. She uses Grimm fairy tales because she says they've stood the test of time. Go to, your homework is to go to storiesfirst.org and watch her tell stories, and you'll see other people telling stories doing very well. Anyway, the teacher will make the story comprehensible by drawing pictures, occasionally giving a translation, nothing wrong with that, a quick translation, and using context, making sure the rest of the story is comprehensible. What we have found is that when you do this, they pick up vocabulary from the story at a very good rate, and adding extra drills and exercises to reinforce the vocabulary is basically a waste of time. That's what we found. As a teacher, you're better off telling more stories. We think that good elementary beginning language teachers are storytellers. By the way, I want to also give you some unwanted advice about your social life. I want to make your social life better, of course, and solve a big problem. Let's say you're invited to a party and you don't know anybody. You know maybe two people and they leave early and there you are. You can't just walk out. What do you do? To prepare for this, I suggest get on Netflix or whatever you use and watch the 3 latest hit movies. Then you can walk up to someone in the party and say, hey, I just saw Terminator 29. Have you seen it? Wasn't it wonderful? What did you think of Arnold? And the odds are good someone will have seen that movie because you know what movies are popular, and you will have a very satisfactory conversation that will be equal to what goes on in literature classes, because everyone has opinions, not just about the casting, but about the plot. What did you think of the ending? All that stuff. So stories is the answer. The way we carry this out once you become comfortable with the language, we bring in more reading. Let me tell you quickly what the research on reading says. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. Still, I'm such a night person. The answer in reading is self-selected reading. That's it. The more reading you do that's self-selected, and I've been reviewing this in the research, etc., the more you know about the world, the more you know about history, geography, science. Also, the better your grammar, and Donald Trump, the better your spelling, the better your writing. In fact, I think that is the major source of our competence in literacy, and it's where we learn about the world. That's the secret. Self-selected pleasure reading, reading that is so much fun you don't want to put the book down. There is good evidence for this, and if you go to my website and look up all these articles, I just wrote a short review paper of 500 words, that was the whole paper, reviewing the literature on self-selected reading. But I'll give you the best evidence for it. It's what comedian Garrison Keillor said about what happens when people give you gifts as books as gifts. To me, books as gifts are assigned reading. Someone gives you a book and then they ask you 3 weeks later, oh, how did you like blah, blah, blah? You know, oh, I really haven't read it. He has this great quote. He says, because I was a literature major in college, people are always giving me gifts of great novels like the Bronte sisters, Charles Dickens. And there they are on my shelf. And they're all great, capital G, and I've never read any of them. And every time I walk by the shelf, I feel these books staring down at me, making me feel guilty. I've overcome this, and I cross out the beginning where it says, to Steve, my best friend, with great affection, blah, blah, blah. I get rid of that so nobody finds out. And I say, I just haven't read it, so there. I do not like it when people recommend books, when they do it strongly. If they mention a book, that's something else. But they say, you've really got to read this, except one person. There's one person, when he recommends a book, I read it immediately because he knows me better than I know myself. And he has always been right. And that's my son, who has recommended about 10 books to me, and they've changed my life. They're all novels. They're all science fiction. And that's where you learn things. We're very interested, by the way, as English teachers, in academic language. We want people to be prepared to study science and language. Turns out light reading can do that for you. Great study. Jeff McQuillan, one of my former students and now esteemed colleague, has looked at research on this. Here's one study that he quoted, which I've read. Science fiction, if you do 1 million words of reading, it's about a year's reading of science fiction, you will be sufficiently exposed to half of the scientific vocabulary that you need to read in any area of science. I'm kind of running out of time, isn't that right? So let me close with telling you about my cousin, Evelyn, who's now, oh, Evelyn, she's wonderful. She was my mom's best friend when we were younger. Kind of a niece-aunt bonding. So I'm very loyal to Evelyn. She's 93 now. And she told me that she was always interested in the study of law. Her late husband, Marty, really good guy, he had a law degree. And she was always impressed at how much he knew about everything because he knew about law. He knew about trials, suing people, all this stuff, which is what makes American society go around. So she said, I'm going to take a course in law. So I know all these things. I gave her some advice. I said, Evelyn, don't do this. Instead, get novels. I've been sending her novels, actually, by a wonderful author named John Grisham, Grisham, who writes legal novels. What happens? One of my favorite is The Runaway Jury. What happens in a jury, how you can change things around by getting party. Okay. She did it. She read about 10 of these. She said it's like having a year of law school. She knows everything about the law now and was entertained the entire time. Free voluntary reading, self-selected reading that you like is the core of everything. What Beniko Mason does in her program is before the kids start reading, she gives them a good amount of time just reading easy stuff. So they're prepared for the heavy stuff. They read, these are college kids with English classes. They read graded readers, simplified text, lots of them. She says, and I now think she's right, read about 300 easy readers and you'll be ready for real stuff. It's not just reading 2 or 3. I'm doing this with myself in Spanish. I got to the point in Spanish where with difficulty, I could read authentic, heavy novels that I really liked. They were hard. I'm taking Beniko's advice and I'm finding lots and lots of easy readers and I'm getting better and better and better. It is really helping. I take a Spanish test once a week, and that is when I go to the market. There's this guy in the market, we've become buddies. I got him to speak Spanish to me, finally, by saying, it's usually they always answer you in English. And I said this to him in Spanish, I say, my goal is to speak Spanish as well as you do. He's okay, I'll help you. This is great. And I've noticed over the months, he's speaking Spanish more quickly to me now. He's using more idiomatic because I'm improving. He's responding to that. So you have one good friend like that, it's a good judge of how far you've gotten. Her kids, these are college students in academic English classes in Japan. They do light reading of graded readers for 2 years, sometimes more. In traditional language classes, you read a hard passage, another hard passage, where it has all the new grammar, and then you have to read authentic stuff right away, and it's really awful. That's what happened to me in French, okay? I've recovered from that. This is the opposite. A long time, easy stuff. Well, I think I've made it. It's now 10:58 here in Los Angeles, and I've just come to the end. Do we have time for questions? Rose, do we have time for questions? Or have I run out of time? Yes? No? I can't hear you.
Yes, we can conduct another meeting if you want.
Let's do it, okay?
Yeah,
I'll
we
deal
will
with
do it, and I will
questions.
send the participants the link.
Okay, so I'll go to you on Yahoo and you'll give me the link.
Yeah, I will surely do.
Okay, see you in a few minutes.
See you in 2 minutes. Bye.
Bye.
Mhm.